Today we're going to look at another horrifying case with you. Monday, September 14th, 2015, was remembered by 16-year-old Nolan Buchanan as the most memorable day of his life. The day before, he had spent Sunday with his girlfriend, a usual morning mass with his girlfriend's family, a get-together with friends, and a beautifully romantic evening. The teenager woke up on Monday morning next to his favorite girl and felt like a free, successful, and powerful businessman to whom the world was open. After all, he was now the owner of Buchanan Construction and would inherit cars, a house, land, money, and other assets. He planned how to run the family business alone and do a better job than his father, who had failed and put the company bankrupt. Nothing could go wrong at this point. On October 1st, 2015, Nolan Keith Buchanan was caught by the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office at Bonita High School in Bonita, California. On June 13th, 2018, a jury of 7 men and 5 women from El Dorado County found Buchanan guilty of 3 charges. Nolan was locked up at the JTC Treatment Center for Teens in South Lake Tahoe. The jury only took a few hours to decide. The young man was sentenced to 150 years in prison, with the chance of parole after 25 years. This was the end of his plan to take over the family business. Nolan's neighbors and friends said he was a good kid and student. Let's thoroughly dissect this horrifying case. Molly encountered Adam Buchanan for the first time when she applied for an office manager position at his firm. At their encounter, Adam was already divorced and solely responsible for raising his son Nolan from a previous marriage. Molly's gregarious and outgoing blonde complexion immediately captured the attention of the company's proprietor. The interest was reciprocal. Molly fell in love with Adam, which led to the formation of a committed partnership and her subsequent marriage to Adam. Molly yearned for a genuine, affectionate family and endeavored to establish a splendid rapport with her stepson when she learned she was expectant. According to those who knew the Buchanans, Gavin was born into a relatively close-knit family of 4, with the family patriarch owning a construction company. The construction firm's profits were sufficient to provide for the family's comfortable living, and they even acquired vacation property in El Dorado, California, where they built a rustic cabin on 19 acres in Greenwood that lacked gas, electricity, water, and sanitation. As a result of Adam's construction work, who actively participated in the house's renovation, the family made frequent visits. The Garden Valley Fire Department was dispatched to a wildfire in Greenwood Township, western El Dorado County, on Highway 193 between Coe and Georgetown on September 13, 2015. Upon arrival, firefighters discovered that the fire had consumed 10 acres of the property. A cabin situated on the property remained ember-like but had collapsed entirely. Charred remains were observed in the ashes. The fire scene remained unattended until 11 a.m. The arriving coroner had a difficult task as the remains of the house were still smoking, and there was no way to examine the inside of the house. He smelled the sweet odor of burned flesh and later discovered a human skull and a burned chest. It appeared that the tragedy had claimed someone's life. The officer requested backup officers from the sheriff's office to arrive and thoroughly examine the scene. The conclusion was obvious: the small, secluded, and remote cabin was not the primary residence of its owners. It was only a short time before I discovered that the Dodge truck and trailer belonged to Buchanan Construction, a company owned by Adam Buchanan. The man in question lived 160 miles from the accident site, about 3 hours away in Bonita, California. It was most likely a country cabin where people came to vacation. I could run the license plates and find out who the car belonged to. The owner may have been a victim of the wildfire. This information validated the police's assumption that the house was merely a country home for people who vacationed here from the city. It was unknown whether Mr. Buchanan or someone else was inside the house. The name of the company's owner provided the detectives with the first clue to start their inquiry. The Bonita police were sent to check Buchanan's family members' well-being. They arrived at the correct address and the Buchanan's driveway when they heard a knock on the door from a white Ford pickup truck. When Adam's 16-year-old son from his previous marriage emerged, he was taken aback and asked the uniformed police what had brought them there. To avoid frightening the family, the cops first determined who was in the house. It's possible that someone from the company took the work car, not the owner. Nolan Buchanan said that his father, Adam, had gone to his country estate 160 mi away with Molly and their 8-year-old son Gavin for the weekend. He said Adam had left him to care for the house while they were gone. Investigators didn't have enough evidence yet to believe that the remains found in the cabin belonged to the Buchanans. Still, the information they had received and the discovery of what were likely the remains of two people by the evening of September 13th was enough to report the family missing in the El Dorado County fire. The next day, on September 14th, El Dorado County Police went to Nolan's house to talk to him more and try to figure out whose lives the fire had claimed. They were met by Adam's parents, Howard and Susan Buchanan. They said that their son, who owns the burned-out cabin, does his home repairs and goes there a lot. The parents were worried because they couldn't reach their son or daughter-in-law until now because of the story. The police discovered that the house was hooked up to generators, but it didn't have power at the time of the tragedy. But gas tanks inside this led to two ideas. The fire could have been accidental or on purpose. By September 15th, the fire scene had cooled down, and Denton James Peterson of the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office said that agents could finally gather evidence, such as pieces of a nearby fire pit. New bones were found that changed the course of the investigation. At that point, police found a piece of brain with a bullet hole in it. We all knew there was a murder, and not an accident, when the sheriff reported that the bodies had been found and sent for forensic DNA testing. In the first set of remains, a bullet had been lodged in the victim's thigh, and the skull had a bullet hole that was the right size for a child. The version of the death being an accident fell by itself, and the version of murder came to the fore. No one doubted that the fire was a way to hide evidence of the crime. What happened? Was it a burglary gone wrong? Was the family tack involved on purpose? If so, by whom and why? Could the crime have something to do with Buchanan? Someone had a grudge against Adam Buchanan because they worked together at a construction company. At first, investigators focused on the second theory. They also looked into Molly's life to see if she had any enemies who could have done the crime. When those lines of inquiry stopped working, officers focused on problems in Molly and Adam's marriage. Over time, investigators learned that there were many of them. Molly and Adam's relationship started to get worse, and at the time of the crime, they had been sleeping apart for a while. A diary was found in which Molly described being abused by Adam. Witnesses said Adam was rude to both Molly and the children. Molly's mother, Susie Slanker, told investigators that there were times she thought they would kill each other during one of their fights. Molly didn't break up with Adam, but she would take her son and go to her parents' house occasionally until the next fight. It turned out that the couple liked to hunt in the area around their country home. Since everyone was carrying a gun, police thought that during another fight, one of the husbands pulled out a gun and shot himself. When he realized what he had done, he killed himself. But there was a problem. If the tragedy happened because of a fight between a husband and wife, then the murder weapon should have been close by. But it wasn't. Investigators thought that the gun might have been damaged in the fire and might not have been as obvious as they thought it would be. For 5 days, forensic team members took turns cleaning up the house. The search was done with surgical precision, but it didn't lead to the killer. No weapons were found in the house at this point. The results of the forensic study showed that the bodies belonged to Adam Buchanan, Molly and John McAfee, along with their 8-year-old son. All three of them had been shot before the fire, and the angle of the wounds ruled out the idea that someone had killed themselves. Because there were no guns in the house, there had to be a fourth person there who shot the Buchanans, and the police had to start their investigation over. They had no choice but to talk to Nolan's 16-year-old son. Nolan told police that the family drove away in an old Dodge truck. According to the son, his father chose to use the company car instead of his own Ford, parked in the driveway, because he would decorate the area near his country cabin with rocks. This truck was what police found near the burned building. When asked why Nolan didn't go on vacation with his family, the young man said, "I had to take care of the house and garden while his father and stepmother were away," which was the same answer he gave in the first interview. Nolan also said that their neighbor was growing illegal grass on the edge of the Buchanan land, which got his dad into many fights with the neighbor because he wouldn't stop planting the grass and threatened to call the police about the family business. According to Nolan, the company was having money problems and was cutting back on staff. From what his father had said, there were now only 5 employees, and the company's debts grew quickly. The investigation now had a lot of helpful information, and the detectives had a suspect, a neighbor. In that area, increasing illegal herbs was often linked to violent crime. Detectives thought that Buchanan and his family might have been killed because of the fear of calling the police. The problem was that no one knew which neighbor they were talking about, so they went around the neighborhood and spoke to every homeowner. This worked. They talked to a man who confirmed the story of a fight with Adam over growing an illegal crop, but he said the fight was over after a heated argument. The neighbor had an alibi, and the other story was not credible. What needed to be fixed was the family's business's financial problems, which started on September 18th. The police went to Adam's company and talked to the employees, confirming Nolan's words that the business was in a bad way. It was close to going bankrupt because it owed more than $30,000, which meant some employees had to be fired. Some fired employees were unhappy with their pay cuts and could have been involved in the crime. Over the weekend, students from the nearby high school cleaned up a business park close to Adam's construction company. This was a positive sign for the police. On September 19th, Molly McAfee and Adam Buchanan's small purse with their ID cards and wallet was found under one of the bushes. Nearby, a .22 caliber rifle was also found. Detectives went to the scene of the crime right away, and the county sheriff's office came up with a new theory: the killer had killed the Buchanan family with the rifle and then taken their documents to hide his tracks. This was a big find because it meant someone had gone all the way to Greenwood to kill the family and then gone back to Bonita to get rid of the bag and murder weapon. As the body was found close to where Buchanan Construction was located, it supported the idea that one of the boss's angry employees killed him. Detectives sent the gun and the bag of papers to be analyzed, asking for a warrant to examine the company's records and property. During the search, investigators got lucky a second time. They could access a video surveillance camera installed on the business's property. By a happy coincidence, the camera's lens was pointed not at the company's property, but at the middle of the parking lot. This discovery almost solved the case, since the family had left town on Friday. When agents watched the video from Friday, they were shocked to see that Adam had hitched a trailer full of rocks to a Ford F-150, not a Dodge truck, as Nolan had told them. Detectives realized that the young man had lied to them on purpose. They figured that if the white Ford had towed the rock trailer to the cabin, someone had driven it back and put it in front of the Buchanan family home. Investigators re-interviewed Nolan to keep him safe while getting as many details as possible. Nolan again told them about his weekend, including where he had been and who he had seen. This time, they asked him what movie they had seen at the theater and how he had paid for shopping at the mall and dessert on a date. Unbeknownst to them, Nolan answered with his father's credit card. The officers then applied for a warrant to search Buchanan's home in Bonita, search the vehicles, and look at financial records. The Ford was still parked in the driveway and was closely inspected. Traces of reddish soil were sticking to the wheels, similar to what they had seen in Greenwood. If the Ford had been used for a trip last weekend or earlier, the soil would have been there, but they would not have been as obvious. The fire destroyed wheel tread marks near the country house, but the dirt buildup showed that the car had likely been to Greenwood lately. Private eyes checked the credit card statements and saw that Adam Buchanan had used his credit card at Taco Bell on his way to Greenwood on September 11, 2018. But Nolan said he stayed home and didn't go with his parents. He also said he had the credit card with him. When the police went to the diner and looked at the security cameras, they saw exactly what they thought they saw. Detectives searched the Ford and found a Taco Bell receipt from September 11th that listed not 3 but 4 drinks. Evidence found at the fire scene also pointed to 4 drink cups, which meant Nolan was in the car. The next credit card transaction happened on September 12th at the Valencia Club bar in Buchanan, which is about 30 minutes away from the cabin. Detectives knew about the bar because Adam's parents told them their son and daughter-in-law liked to go there after renovations to the cabin. Security cameras caught the couple leaving the bar, and traffic cameras on the highway helped figure out where they were going. On the day of the fire, a Ford F-150 drove toward the Buchanan cabin, and at 3:30 a.m., it drove the opposite way. In the first instance, the camera caught Adam and Molly in the truck. In the second, it only caught Nolan. Adam's credit card was used to pay at 3 of Bonita's businesses on September 13th: Starbucks, McDonald's, and a gas station. The bank told detectives that Buchanan only had 1 credit card, which differed from what Nolan said. The crime scene reports were back by this time. The gun had Nolan's fingerprints on it, and he was caught in the middle of a high school class. Nolan Buchanan pleaded not guilty to the charges against him. He tried to change the story by saying that his father had shot the family, who then pointed a gun at him and, in self-defense, took the gun away, accidentally shooting his father. Nolan insisted it was self-defense, saying that he was in such a state of panic and extreme fear that he set the house on fire to make it look like nothing had happened. The defense kept bringing up Adam's abuse of his son and other family members. The medical examiner questioned the decision because the bullet hole mark on a piece of Gavin's skull looked like it was made by a shot fired at almost a 90-degree angle. On the other hand, Nolan said that he and his brother's beds were next to each other and that the noise and screams woke them both up simultaneously. It was at this point that Nolan said he saw someone enter Gavin's bedroom and shoot him. The shooter then pointed the rifle at Nolan, who somehow managed to push the attacker away. This explanation didn't match up with the forensic evidence, so the prosecution decided that Nolan killed his brother when they were alone in the house. Nolan also killed his parents while they were at a bar waiting for his father and stepmother to come back. This is clear from where the bodies were found. Adam was killed first, then Molly. Nolan then took the rifle and his parents' papers, put gasoline on the bodies, and set the house on fire. He then went home, met his girlfriend, and spent the day making up an alibi. On July 13, 2018, a jury found Nolan guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced him to 150 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. When Judge Kingsbury announced the sentence, she talked about the verbal and physical abuse Nolan had to deal with. She also mentioned that Nolan killed his brother because he didn't want him to have to go through the same horrible things or have to live with what his father had already done to him. Facts about how the crime and following arson were planned, the creation of Elias and Nolan's plans to run the family business, which he had told his family about. The judge said that Nolan had broken the rules and shown bad behavior at the South Lake Tahoe Juvenile Treatment Center, where he went after being arrested. Judge Kingsbury told Nolan that he could change his mind. Following the Senate bill and Supreme Court decisions, you will have a chance to get out on release in 25 years if you behave well. It is up to you to decide whether you want to take that chance. Nolan still says he is innocent. If he ever gets out on parole, he will have to pay the victims a huge amount of money. The amount of the payment is unknown at this time. Thanks for watching, guys. James was with you. Please subscribe and always click the bell to catch new stories worldwide.